Carl and Louis here from Games, Brains and Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial.com for short. And it's another in-depth, a much shorter one than we've been doing. You know, we've previously done Nightmare on Elm Street, we've previously done Hellraiser, we have previously done the Paranormal Activity series. This time we're looking at a 4-block film series. It is, of course, you saw the title, the Wreck film series. 4 films. The series beginning in 2007 and as of right now, as of the time of recording in 2021, ended in 2014. Wreck in 2007. Wreck 2 in 2009. Wreck 3 Genesis in 2012. And Wreck 4 Apocalypse in 2014. Some titles there that are very misleading. Genesis and Apocalypse. Oh, really are. We'll get into them when we get to the specific films. But we should point out, if you don't know, the REC part, the REC, what that basically is symbolising, it's a camera recording, the red dot, and the REC as in full recording. That's where that comes from. The series is a zombie supernatural found footage horror series with a touch of realism that is introduced in REC 3 and then continued in REC 4. So found footage 1 and 2 and part of 3. Yep. And then the second half of 3 and 4 not found footage. Yep. We have across all the films one particular character more than any other. It is Angela Vidal. She is the name, the character of the star of number 1, part of number 2, and number 4, played by Manuela Velasquez. She's great.
I do really like her.
Oh yeah, she really stands out. She really does. Lead antagonist of all the films except Wreck 3 Genesis, which sounds strange, is the best one in my opinion, but that's not a slur on her. She's just not in it. Do you know what I mean? There's no reason for her to be in it.
There's a mention of something that happened in the first one, but not her specifically shown.
Okay.
Even as like a cameo.
That's true.
Yeah,
yes.
So
yes.
It's just a nod to the other films, but not her physically in the film.
Agreed. Yes, absolutely. So, what do you think of the series as a whole? Let's start there.
I really enjoyed it. The series.
You know, 4, yeah?
Yeah. As a series of films, there's something different about each film.
Yep.
Sometimes for good or bad, you know, kind of ups and downs of the whole series.
Cool, yeah.
So sometimes what you find different, sometimes isn't what you love about it. But the fact they made all the films different. Sometimes some series we watched, we've had to different. I can't think of the word. Differentiating between the films.
True.
They kind of mesh into one, whereas this one's like, well, you've got clear Rec 1, 2, 3, 4. The fact that it was Spanish kind of gave it a different edge as well. So different, like a more European take on it rather than American or British. I enjoyed that twist on it. And the fact they were kind of like the whole infection part I find scarier than like lumbering zombies.
Okay.
I prefer like more infected.
Yeah. What you have fast zombie
thing. Yeah, like 28
thing.
days later, we kind of first introduced. I kind of think.
Yeah, I like that you started with offering something different, because my initial thought was, well, not really. Rec 1 and 2 are very similar films, but actually I'm wrong. You're right. Rec 2 does introduce something, while sticking to the formula, does introduce a very different angle of the film series as a whole. And even Rec 3 continues in what seems like the same fashion, but then about turns everything there. You're not wrong about each one offering up something different, even if it's a location in regards to Rec 4 and so on. I personally am a big fan of the series as a whole. I think people will say it's got diminishing results. I kind of disagree. I think it's peaks and valleys. I think we peak with Rec 1. Yeah. We dip a bit with Rec 2. Yeah. We then peak again with Rec 3 and dip again with Rec 4. I think that is. But there's nothing here that I would say is a bad movie. Nothing here that I would put below 6 out of 10. Like that kind of score.
Yeah, and I'd say it's based, like, Rec 1 is based on something that could happen.
Very believable, very realistic.
And I'd say, especially in current times, with the whole idea of quarantining, starting with one building, people go on a witch hunt for where things started, the epicentre of an epidemic. Yep. Which is probably what they believe it to be. Well, we don't know the full extent of it in that sense, do we? We don't get an idea of how far. No. How far the isolated event at the beginning of Rec 1. We kind of, not Rec 1, we do understand, obviously, the growth when we see Rec 3. But it feels like it's still in Spain, doesn't it feel like it goes...
That's because it hasn't.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I love about this movie, is it does actually make clear that the government in question here is doing a damn good job of keeping this shit isolated.
Yeah, it's
does
quite
a
small
very
time
good
period.
job. Yeah, it's a very small time period. Across all 4 films, it's a very... In fact, Rec 1, 2 and 3 all take place across 24 hours. Yeah?
Yeah.
All across 24 hours. Rec 1, 2 and 3. Rec 4 jumps a few times weeks ahead, but that's an important plot point for that film. But the first 3 films all take place across 24 hours, maybe even less time than that, because Rec 2 picks up directly off the events of Rec 1. Rec 3 is occurring at the exact time of Rec 1 and then Rec 2. That's fucking amazing if you think about a 3-film series taking place across such a small amount of time.
And it's a good story we like weave together, and I just really enjoyed it. And watching them all together was a definite plus. I feel like we watched them pretty much
one after the other. Yeah, the films I'd seen loads in the past as well. The only one I hadn't seen more than once was Rec 4. That's the only one. Well, then, favourite movie in the series of the 4, which is the best one in your eyes?
I like the 3rd one the best. Because I feel like you bond with the characters, and you really don't want things to go the way they do.
Yep.
Because again, it starts a very relatable situation. You don't want it to turn out that way for them, and it all just goes to shit. And there's some sort of inventive ways of like controlling the infected, and I appreciated the way they went with it, and not having found footage all the way through. Having to be more cinematic.
So much. I love the way they do it as well. We'll talk about the way they do that in the film. I agree. For me, Rec 3 Genesis is the one. As much as it's like Rec the original is probably a better film overall. I get that completely, and I can understand why people prefer that. But for me, Rec 3 Genesis, of creating characters that I fucking didn't just care about, I really, really liked. That's what it did. Better than Rec 1. Yeah. Absolutely. Best moments, worst moments? Some of the things that jump out immediately from your mind when you think of the 4 films overall, where you're like, that's one of my favourite moments, or that's one of the worst moments.
So again, going to Rec 3, where the uncle talks about a bitten hand, and you sit up and go, what?
Yep.
And it was really cool, because I'm like, it was just a really subtle link. And it was something that people might just brush off and go, oh yeah, I got bitten by a dog.
Yeah.
In your head you're going, no, that's all going to
That's the catalyst, yeah.
When the uncle, and again the same uncle, when he just
falls from the top.
From the balcony, and then it's all just like, oh, it's on. Game on,
indeed.
Rec 1, where all the infected look up the stairs. I look up the stairwell. Yeah, I've stole one of your ones.
Stole mine there, yeah. One of my scariest horror movie moments.
And the old lady that just won't quit. The one they fight. The one that slip on.
In Rec 1,
yeah. In Rec 1, sorry. And just the brutality of that. And it looks realistic as well, like the way like her body looks. She's just wearing a slip like she would be normally, and it just looks quite raw and brutal. Interesting. Nothing from Rec 2 or 4? What about when it comes to like worst moments? Rec 4 just felt a bit the whole idea. There's a lot more that can go wrong with a boat, so I don't think you probably quarantine people on a boat because storms, other man shit. Well, I don't know if I agree with you on that. I thought one of the best things about Rec 4 is the location decision. I would be out in the desert underground, like at sea. Your boat could be sunk. And there's organisms living in the sea that could be infected with stuff. It's your opinion, but I don't. I feel Rec 2. I think the fact that it comes straight after Rec 1, and there's certain bits I didn't like about certain elements of it. No, you can't think of anything. That's not a bad thing. Yeah, like it just was like a continuation of Rec 1, but certain things are kind of expanded upon, and fair. I mean, some of mine, you already mentioned one, Rec 1, when the zombies all look up directly from the bottom of the stairwell. That's a terrifying moment. Rec 1's introduction, it's set up. The idea of the late night TV show filming firefighters and ending up in a quarantine is simply spectacular. That is an incredible opening, and one that you can completely understand and relate to. I love that. Absolutely. A bad moment comes from Rec 2, and it's basically the introduction of the teenage kids and the exposition dump that they're just there basically to expand and push upon this idea of possession. It's not very well done in my opinion. Rec 3 Genesis, I could pick a bazillion out of this, but one of my favourite is when Clara hears Calder playing their song, and that's how she knows he's alive. To the incredible ending when they're dying and reaching out for each other, even though they're both infected at that point. Incredible. Rec 4 Apocalypse, a little bit harder with this one. I think the location is great, but it's not something that stands out more than anything else. I can't even praise... The best I can do, I think worth praising, is that it brings a character from all the films in. Yeah. We've got someone from Rec 2. We've got Angela overall from the Rec series, and we have an elderly lady who is from Rec 3. That's a bit jammed in, but it is still a nice reference point where it's like, okay, this is the same world. Absolutely. Okay, we touched upon something else. Then... That religious aspect, the important
thing that differentiates Rec from every other zombie movie that's introduced in Rec 2. What do you think of that?
I still prefer like some sort of science research gone wrong. I still like the idea of that because there's so many kind of angles without religion. There's a million films when you even like look for any kind of streaming sites, possession of this person, you know, dragging me like I'm going to hell. All these kind of hell films. I feel like if you're doing like this, I feel like fucking around with genetics and stuff is more scary. Is scarier to me. Coming from a non-religious kind of perspective, I feel like there's so much more you can do with. We're going to muck around with this, and this is what the outcome is, and it's human made.
Yeah, I never liked it. I never liked it because it felt very convoluted to me. However, on replay and rewatching, I think it's what might actually help Rec stand out from the pack overall, because it's still not saying they're not zombies. It's still not saying that at all. It's just instead of being a traditional bite and infected that way, that stuff does still happen. It's via a possession angle with a host and stuff like that. That does make you go, wow, that's really weird. And it's something they would try to correct the course in Rec 4, so to speak. But here's the thing. I now accept the possession angle that's introduced in Rec 2 because of what that possession angle is used for in Rec 3. In Rec 3, it's used in such a positive way, in such a clever way to get towards our ending and progress it along that I have to love it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, without that, how could we have got to what we got in Rec 3?
Yeah.
Part of that is too important.
Yeah.
That I'm like, you know what? That's fine because of that.
Yeah.
Then, now, on Rec 3, that filming change. So, Rec 3 famously stops short of being a complete found footage movie. Its first 20 minutes is a collection of recordings done on phone, professional cameras, stuff, and it's all wedding based and happiness and stuff like that. Then, when all the shit hits the fan, famously, of course, Koldo, the star, the male star of that film, he shouts at his cousin to stop filming. His cousin even says the words, "Oh, we have to keep filming. People need to know." And Koldo's like, "Shut, don't be so stupid," and smashes the camera. Yeah. And then we transition to cinematic films. For me, I love it. I absolutely love it. But do you?
I really liked it because sometimes we've always kind of gone through this with recorded footage film, like found footage films, of why they're filming. Sometimes it's like, we've got to have the truth come out, this and this. Sometimes it's a light attached to the camera, so we're filming because we've got the light. That kind of, drawn out. Yep. But in this one, it was like, literally, I didn't even notice. I did notice the switch, but because they were filming on different kind of like sections of cameras, it just felt quite. I enjoyed it. Yeah. I enjoyed it because I don't always love found footage films because it's just awkward. It's hard to watch, hard to see. Whereas this one, straight into.
I would love to have this confirmed by those involved, but I think I know why they chose to do it. There is no good reason for someone to be filming throughout this event. In the first and the second one, they have a reason. In the third one, it could not have made it. The only way it could have made sense is if that kid was to stay alive and attached. But then how could we see Clara's side of things? Because the film switches between the two. Yeah. So what, two different people are filming for the sake of... And we would have criticised the movie for that heavily. Yeah. I don't think they knew... I think they might have planned originally, and then we're like, we can't think of a reason.
Trying to get back to each other without having...
it done properly.
Yeah, because you have to think of two reasons.
Two reasons, sensible, realistic reasons for two different people to be filming. Yeah. Who then also two people who can't realistically die until the end of the film. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So yeah, I think they kind of did that. Continuing that then, thoughts on the parasite angle that's introduced in Rec 4 Apocalypse. So Rec 4 takes the possession thing and says, you know what, that's a bit too much. Let's dial it back and make it so that it's some sort of parasitic creature that lives inside a host. And that's how, and it almost drops the possession side of things. Instead, that parasite, and then when it bites someone, infects them too.
Oh, I think they should have kept with the... I think if you establish something so early on, just kept with it right to the end.
Even though they offer up the kind of fair explanation, which is they didn't scientifically understand it and they're only working it out now. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit of both, really, right? Which is why we kind of say Rec 4 is another drop.
It is a drop, yeah. It's a tough one to swallow, pun. Particularly as well as it started to descend into that whole, it becomes a bit Shivers-like almost. And I'm not in love with that aspect of it. I like it more than the possession angle because it's more grounded in realism, I personally think. Yeah. But there we go. Yeah. What about the future of this series? Do you think there's any future? Do you think there's any possibility of ever getting a Rec 5?
I reckon so.
Right? Even it's been 7 years now, which is the longest gap we've had.
I feel like with the pandemic, I feel like it's going to stoke people's imaginations for films involving infections and pandemics and infected. I really feel like there will be.
Okay.
That's just my opinion on things. I feel like people might have taken our element of isolation and pandemics and kind of gone with that.
I disagree completely.
Okay.
Disagree completely. I think there's no desire to watch a film about current situations at all. We've had contamination and pandemic films over the many decades.
But they were though. So they have like
look at
not zombies though. Contamination is a bit more realistic. Which is
zombies. Any zombie film is a pandemic. Any zombie film is a pandemic. Anyone. It's an infection that spreads. It's an infection that spreads. Yeah. That's a pandemic. Same thing. Anything. We can do that from pretty much everything. So I'm not convinced there's any life in that or any particular interest in that. Particularly ones based in reality. You'll get some interesting horrors come out of the idea, but I don't think there'll be anything spectacular because we've pretty much seen it done over the years without needing the real life slant.
Yeah.
As for future and Rec series, no. I think we're done. I think we're done because we haven't had a new film since 2014. The films came in quick succession. 2007, 2009, 2 years. 3-year gap between Genesis and then a 2-year gap between Rec. We've now hit 7 years and Rec 4 ends it. It ends it in a definitive way. You disagree on that ending. We'll get to that when we get to Rec 4, but you disagree. For me, I think there's no future in that series at all. I think you've told your story from beginning to end. Let's just sit and enjoy it. There's no point in a reboot because what could a reboot even ever do except here's just more zombie stuff. I would like to see the people involved come up with something new.
Yeah. Okay.
See what they could do.
I'd be up for that as well.
Yeah. And of course, part of the reason why it definitely won't is we have had remakes. The remake, Quarantine, was released in 2008. It's an American near shot-for-shot remake of the original. So basically, if you can't handle subtitles, go watch Quarantine. It's not a bad film. It's Rec. I struggled with it because it happens to star someone who was heavily featured in Ally McBeal, so I couldn't look beyond that character. I can't remember the actor's name, but you'd know his face. But I couldn't move on from that. I was like, dude, what are you doing in this?
Not the one that was from Bean?
No, not Peter McNeil.
Yeah.
The other one, his partner in the company, main star.
Oh, I've not watched him.
You know his face. But Quarantine is just Rec, but without the subtitles, basically. So you're not really going to see anything bad there. That film would get its own sequel called Quarantine 2 The Terminal, which is not Rec 2 and not a remake of Rec 2. It is a standalone film. Not standalone. It's a sequel to Quarantine, but not related to the Rec series.
Okay.
And it's called a terminal. It's set partly on a plane and then the rest of it in a terminal. I hate that movie. One day we'll do it.
I've seen it.
One day we'll do a smaller in depth where we do Quarantine and Quarantine 2.
Yeah.
We will look at them. But Quarantine and Terminal, I really dislike it. And I dislike it because its villain. Its villain is hilariously bad. Hilariously bad. Because of course, in a zombie film, we need a human villain. Obviously. Which brings us to the first film, Rec 2007, Spanish found footage horror, as we already said, co-written and directed by Jaime Balaregio and Paco Plaza. I think I've got them pretty much right. It does star Manuela Velcasco, plays Angela Vidal. She's a reporter for a documentary TV show called While You Are Sleeping. A wicked idea, and you could believably see this shit on TV. We do shows, what it's called While You're Sleeping, this service does this. Yeah. Like, of course that exists. We have similar things, 24 Hours on A&E and stuff, like all these shows where it's like about emergency services and
people
things.
Like watching that.
Yeah,
so
love them.
They would work it. And this opening part doesn't, it's not a 1 minute scene.
It's good.
It's a nice established scene.
Yeah, it's very established. A lot of characters, including some that aren't even really in the film.
No, and it just... It's nice to kind of get an idea of Angela. I feel like she's kind of quite driven. She wants maybe a bit more than what she's doing. You know, it's
agreed.
Like, I've got the night shift doing this like crap, but I'm building up my way up to more. The firemen all seem pretty professional, but you know, willing to let her in.
Yeah, they seem to be enjoying the attention almost to a degree. And what's really nice is it's not the attention that you'd hate, which is, oh, there's a girl in the fire station. It's very respectful. They're enjoying the attention of the camera more than anything else. Because admittedly, you do think that it's going to be, because we're all men, male firemen, and it's like, here comes this pretty young girl. You're expecting some sort of sleazy lecherous comments. This film does not do that.
And it gives you an idea of like a normal routine night would be pretty
boring.
Mm-hmm.
They even say it to her.
Yeah,
you
like
know?
I say, I would say, yeah, it's pretty boring. Mm-hmm. They have the dinner, what they do in their downtime, and it kind of, when it builds up to where you're actually going, it makes more sense rather than, oh, here's a minute scene, and we're straight on to the next part.
No, because bear in mind as well, we're seeing as like the cameras as well. So along with a cameraman is named Pablo. So they are covering this night shift, as we said, the night shift for a local fire station in Barcelona. And as you said, we've got that elements where we'll be meeting them and seeing them eat dinner. We then cut to a later part where she's back in the same rooms and it's completely empty. Yeah. And she's like quietly whispering, they're all asleep now, that kind of thing. So hours have passed by effectively. It's a really strong opening, building up the character of Angela and introducing us to these firemen. There's two particularly that are more defined because they will become the two that are part of the film, as it were. But the fire station gets an alarm and is called to a local apartment block where apparently a woman has been heard screaming and she's trapped in her home. People can't get in to help her. Angela and Pablo, part of the documentary and so on, are accompanying the firemen. And the two, particularly, it's Alex and Manu. They arrive at the apartment block. All the residents are in the lower area, sort of saying, you know, and it's really done well as well because everyone's talking at once. Yeah. And stuff like that. For that level of realism, it nails that.
Yeah, because you would have to kind of go in and sort of like just block out all the noise to get to where you need to get to.
But there's also an incredible part of authority here as well, because it's the two firemen and two policemen as well. And there's a lot of like, shut up, we're trying to speak here kind of thing, like authority figures, and everyone stops and quiet and stuff like that. They break into this woman's apartment, but she's feral, it seems, and attacks and biting one of the policemen on the neck. This causes panic as they all try to leave the building, but find that they've been locked in by the police and what sounds like military outside. Yeah.
Because all the sheeting comes down, doesn't it?
Yeah, sheeting comes down. You hear a loudspeaker tell them not to panic, and they're just being quarantined for safety reasons and stuff. No explanation, but you know, causes a lot of accusations to be sort of thrown about. Panic sets in, obviously, amongst the residents. There's a couple of particular characters established here. For example, there's a woman with a young daughter. Her daughter is sick, and she's upset because her husband had gone to get medicine, and he won't be allowed back in. Her daughter was bitten by her dog, and her dog ended up at the vet's. Super fucking... That's it. That there is the thing that strings and keeps all the Wreck movies together. That one specific thing is incredible in that sense. This dog. So there's a lot of talking here as well. We get that Angela decides to film some residents, and you get to know some more residents. Some likeable, some not so much. Yep. There's a little bit of racism towards a Chinese couple that live upstairs as well, and things like that. Oh, it's them and it's their fault, and they eat weird food and things like that from the sleazy-looking elderly.
Oh God,
you know?
yeah, doesn't he? Yeah.
The police, the policeman who wasn't hurt, and the firemen are trying to establish who's there, and it's like, no, so-and-so is still in an apartment up there, and things like that. Alex goes upstairs to go get this elderly man and bring him down, and it does lead to what is a brilliant jump scare, as it were, which is, as the camera's focused on the residents all talking at once, basically Alex comes flying down from the top of the balcony and hits the fucking ground.
Oh, it's pretty...
Yeah, you've got a fact about that as well, and that it's real.
Yeah, that they didn't tell them what they were doing with that scene, so their reactions were like real. So for like the dummy they used fall in, completely took them off guard.
Yeah,
it's good. I love reading stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We then the original woman ends up killing another woman and then gets shot by the police officer. But then see her body has then gone afterwards. There's your first sort of zombie issue kind of thing. The rest start to accuse the mother with the little girl of being infected and things like that. And there's an array of characters constantly talking back and forth. But it is interesting. It's not messy. It's supposed to be real, and it really sells that. It really does. Which does warrant the arrival of a health inspector who comes in fully... What do they call that?
Full PPE.
PPE, as it were. Yeah.
Biohazard, proper like hazmat, like the full shebang, like full.
He goes to treat the two injured men. So we're talking about Alex, who fell from a height, who hasn't died, and the police officer who originally bitten. They go to a separate area at the back of the apartment in some sort of textile workshop. Angela and a cameraman managed to film their conversation through like a window at the side angle because they're not allowed in. And we hear him describe this as a virus that is apparently similar to rabies. And they traced it back from the dog. Yeah. Which is how they got to this apartment block just in time, effectively, before it could get any worse. But he does something to one of them which kills the policeman, and then he reanimates and starts attacking. The survivors managed to escape the textile workshop and close them down, but it's not going to hold. particularly as the young girl in her mother's arms then turns into a zombie and bites her mother's face. Great scene. Kid is fantastic. This little girl's brilliant. She's got a little bit of feral about it. She runs upstairs. They end up handcuffing the mother to the stairwell as well.
That's quite hard. That's quite harsh.
It is. You feel bad for her. Do you know what I mean? You feel bad for her. You really do. The girl ends up killing another, and the rest of the residents are then chased upstairs by the zombies who are now breaking out of the textile workshop. The mother being handcuffed there as the zombies are breaking out is pretty horrible as well. Do you know what I mean? That's pretty horrible. And we get quick succession of everyone pretty much dying here, as the survivors end up only being Angela and Pablo, who are chased into the penthouse. You know, that lead into the penthouse is the scene we often talked about, where the cameras look down the stairway and you see everybody look up. The zombies, and you hear them racing up the stairs. This film relies a lot on sound. Sound more than the sights. The pounding of something running down a hallway. Brilliant stuff. And in the penthouse, they find an apartment of some sort of priest who was tasked, basically, this is where it gets a little complicated, a little bit harder to follow. He was tasked with isolating an enzyme which was carried by a young Portuguese girl named Tristiana Medeiros. And her symptoms suggested she was demonically possessed. But the church, with a sort of scientific angle, didn't see it so much as spiritual, so as something, an infection. And they were trying to isolate that aspect. As the agent attempted to treat the girl, the enzyme actually mutated and became contagious. The agent then sealed her in the house to die of starvation.
Nice.
She didn't, as we then find out. And we hear all of this via a tape recorder, newspaper cuttings, imagery as they're looking around. But also, she's not alone. As we get an affected boy who's inside the attic, damages the light on Pablo's camera, and we basically end the film in near darkness and night vision. Pablo activates the night vision, and the ghoulish Tristiana, she's very ghoulish, she's very gaunt and thin and stuff like that, very slow moving. And we see her searching around basically for some food. Angela and Pablo obviously tried to escape, but Pablo is heard and killed by Tristiana, dropping the camera then. Angela picks it up and looks through the screen, seeing Tristiana eating Pablo. She panics, trips, and drops the camera. And the last shot is the camera continuing to record as Angela is dragged into the darkness screaming. That is Wreck. It's
very iconic brilliant shot, isn't it?
It would be used in some DVD covers. Quarantine would use that exact ending on their cover, and it was like, wow, talk about give it away.
Yeah, I don't know why you have to have that. You could just literally have just Wreck.
Yeah, of course.
Or like a brief hint to like the quarantine thing with like tape in the background or something, but nothing to that extent.
No, it's absurd. It's absurd. You know, don't put fucking important plot points in your film's cover, you know, before you've even seen it. It's an excellent movie. It really is. It holds up by today's standards. It's one of the standard bearers of found footage horror. It's strange considering its time period that while this is very popular, it is very popular and was very successful. That this didn't have the success of Paranormal Activity. I think maybe because the Minimalist Wreck definitely has a bit more money behind it.
And people don't like reading subtitles.
Of course, that was always going to be an issue. If you're from a Western-speaking country, English-speaking country, you often have a problem. Many people do have a problem with reading subtitles and watching it at the same time. I'm not going to slur and say that's wrong or whatever, because each to our own. Me personally, I have no problem with it. And it certainly does not affect my enjoyment of this movie.
No, because when they're not talking, the action takes over.
Yeah, and screams are universal.
Yeah, and there's not too much talking that you'd be like, shh, I'm trying to watch what's going on. So I mean, like the conversations are quite to the point. Like, oh, we're going to this building, keep calm. Like, there's no kind of long. There's not lots of what's the word? Exposition. So like. Oh, when they find a penthouse and they find a tape of the man talking, you can hear that, and you can see that while they're looking around.
Yep.
I don't think there's anything too distracting there, but that's just my way of enjoying films. But I can appreciate some people like to just get involved and hear and watch it in their own language. Of course. And you know, one of the other things I'd praise as well is the Spanish language is very fast. Throw in how fast it's being spoken during panicky moments. I actually think it works quite well to enhance the panic because of how fast it's delivered and spat out and natural it is for the actors to deliver it. It really, really works. It is one of the best found footage horrors you'll ever see. If you've not had the chance to check it out, do absolutely. Yeah. And it's on second watch, not second watch, but when you hear about like, the dog being affected, you're like, it's a bit of a throwaway. It feels throwaway. It feels like a reason to have an infection happen. But obviously, you know,
later we'd come to appreciate that even more.
Because isn't it the dog managed to get upstairs into the apartment?
In Rec 2, yeah, well, let's say it now. Rec 2, yeah. In Rec 2, it's basically how she managed to survive, Tristiana managed to survive, and how other people got infected was she found her way into the vents.
Yeah.
And was able to do that. And she got into, obviously, an apartment one day, and the dog was there alone for whatever reason. And she obviously then bit the dog.
Yeah.
And that's how
where it goes from.
And obviously when the dog then bit the little girl, and that's kind of how that spread. Yeah. Absolutely. But we'll get into Rec 2 now.
Yeah.
So Rec 2, 2009, Spanish found footage zombie horror, sequel to 2007's Rec. The film was written and directed again by Jamu Balgario and Paco Plazia, both of whom returned. So, everything about this is Rec.
Yeah.
In every way, shape or form. And the story takes place immediately after the events of the first film. And when we say immediately, we mean immediately. Yeah. I think 10 minutes might pass.
Yeah.
At most.
It really is, isn't it?
Absolutely. As a heavily armed SWAT-style team are sent into the apartment building. The camera works, so you kind of think, well, how does it found footage? It comes from two things. Body cameras that the SWAT team have, and one particular who's been tasked with documenting what they find. Yeah.
Pretty good setup.
Fine. Absolutely. Their job isn't to just go in and rescue people or anything like that. It's actually to protect Dr. Owen, who's Jonathan Meller, who's an official, according to him, from the Ministry of Health. Once inside, and this is the film, this is the thing about this film. Unlike the first one, this starts off very fucking hot as they're quickly attacked by infected residents. Think about it, and it had to be. Yeah. It had to be. Because this continues off the Rec 1. They didn't go anywhere. No. So we had to have them being
in danger.
In danger immediately. Owen is able to hold them off but bay, though, by chanting religious mantras. It turns out that this is more of a possession base. And like I said, when it's initially revealed, it left me feeling a little bit cold. I was like,
Yeah.
Because, although I'm a bigger fan of traditional zombies, many zombie films with fast runnings I enjoy. Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Or the Infected, as it were. 28 days later, 28 weeks later. I did 28 weeks later. So, and Rec's first film, it worked really well.
Yeah.
So it was a bit like, oh, okay. And it's revealed that Owen is actually a priest sent by the Vatican to get a blood sample from Tristiana, the root of the infection. Yeah. Searching the penthouse, they eventually find a sample, but when testing it, it bursts into flames. And then one of them ends up dropping it. So it now means they need to find the original host, Tristiana, to take a sample. Before they can, though, they're attacked by more infected, and the camera is destroyed. You're like, okay, how are we going to process from there? Well, that's what the film will do. Because this film is effectively split into 3 parts. This part we've just talked about.
Yep.
The next part, and then the third part where the 2 groups are together.
Ah, yes.
Think about it. It's 3 parts.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So let's talk about this first part and what's occurred. Now, I think it's probably the best part of the film.
Yeah.
Because it quickly hots up immediately, and it's frantic from the very moment it starts to the very end of this segment. Even the slow down bits are purely there so we can explain a bit more detail and stuff like that. I think it starts to confuse itself and get a bit convoluted. Well, I'm a priest, I need this blood sample, I need this and all that. And it's like, okay. However, this is a sequel. We needed more. We couldn't just redo the same thing.
No, because
so it works.
Yeah, because it quickly ran out of people. Because you're locked, you're physically locked in one area. So you've got to add an extra element to keep on in the same area.
Absolutely. So I think this is probably the best part of the film.
Yeah, because you can't open up the building because you have to have extra budget and extra story to because once the infection's out, it's going to rip through because the crowd outside, people outside.
Oh yeah, if this got outside,
it's over. Keep it isolated in the same vein as the first film, but obviously add the extra element.
Yep. Absolutely, and it's good as well because the SWAT team that's going in, no one's fully aware of what's occurred inside, so they don't know what to expect. So that's why they run into a lot of problems too. The second portion then takes place around a group of teenagers who are outside on another building's roof, messing around and they see the apartment block across the street being isolated. Loved it. Great start. I was like, okay, all right, yeah, all right. We're seeing it from the outside. Groovy.
Filming on phones. Yes,
filming on phones and stuff like that. They go down to the ground. They're really interested. They think they can find it's really interesting and stuff like that. And they witness the father of the young girl in the original movie, We see him outside holding a package as well.
Yeah.
Which is the medicine.
Yeah.
And you can see he's trying to get into the building, and they're filming him and they're listening and going, oh, he was trying to get into the building. He says this, whatever. And it's like, okay, there's the link. That's cool. But they then see him afterwards as well, talking to one of the other firefighters. And they see the two men, the father and the firefighter, then go down an alleyway. And they obviously go through the sewers.
Yeah.
So this is all established as these two came up with a plan, the firefighter and the father, to get inside the building because they both needed to get inside.
Yeah.
The firefighter says that he was concerned about his friends. He'd lost contact and was worried about them and stuff like that. And he wasn't getting the answers outside from the police and the military, which he wouldn't, absolutely, where the father had a reason. The kids decide to follow them, thinking that they can get a scoop here. We can film shit and we can then reveal it to the world. Internet stuff. Believable to a degree. Not the worst idea.
Yeah.
The problem is these characters are very one note. Very one note. There's nothing special or interesting about them at all. But once inside, they get inside and come out the textile workshop. But once inside, the police who followed them in as well sealed them in. Yeah. And immediately and very quickly, this new group is attacked with several of them being killed. The two different groups end up combining, coming together with the SWAT team from the original and the survivors of our new group. Third portion of the movie.
Yeah.
So, the second part of it.
Yeah, I didn't like... I mean, like, they're teenagers, but I don't know if you...
Go this far?
I don't know, because like, I'm talking from as a grown adult of teenagers and kids that want to kind of be involved in something always exciting, what's going on. So I'm a little bit torn, and I didn't like the fact that like that someone in that position of power managed to get him in. You know, it's like that serious.
I agree. It also seems too easy. Oh, here's a sewer thing that leads directly into the building. Yeah. Easy peasy.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the police followed us in and sealed it up afterwards. Okay. All right, fine. Third portion of the movie reintroduces Angela. Angela turns back up, and she seems to be catatonic almost, but she seems unharmed, which makes you already go, okay.
Where's she been?
The survivors end up questioning one of the boys of the teenage group. He got bitten and possessed, and deduced from him he does a lot of cryptic answers about the original host and the penthouse, and that certain areas can be only accessible in total darkness aside from infrared light, which is such a fucking what?
Yeah.
What?
Oh, that's very specific. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, that's what. Absolutely. And that's where the group find a hidden door using the night vision and Angela's camera. And I don't like this. I was like, okay, no, you're taking this too far with supernatural elements. In darkness, there's suddenly a door.
Yeah.
No. Inside, they're attacked by Tristiana and more are killed before Angela ends up blowing her head off with a shotgun. So Angela kills the original host once and for all. Owen is enraged because he needed the blood sample, but Angela can only think about leaving the building. She doesn't care. Owen refuses to authorize the exit, so basically they're waiting for a call from Owen to say, look, well, okay, we can come out now. So Angela attacks him and kills the last of the SWAT as well. It is revealed that the demon possessing Tristiana is now possessing Angela. Angela kills Owen and then imitates his voice to contact the authorities, saying, she says something in the lines of, there's one survivor, which is Angela. I can't come out because I've been infected and bitten.
Yeah.
So that's how she gets out. She tells them the mission has been accomplished and the only survivor is her. A flashback then reveals what happened right before the stories actually began. As we see, Angela was captured by Tristiana and had an organism, worm thing, transmitted to her.
In her mouth.
In her mouth. And that's how Rec 2 ends. It's inferior. It's inferior to Rec 1, that much is clear. Everything it does right, it kind of copies from Rec 1.
Yeah, and I feel like it's weird because we like the fact that it carries straight on, but to carry straight on such an isolated event, you have to be in the same area of isolation.
Yep.
So it's quite a difficult film to kind of come down on one side because you like the isolation and the fact it doesn't go to a bigger group and lose its potency, and you kind of the story drags a bit more. But the extra elements to keep it chugging along, not great.
No, I agree. Whereas like Rec 1, I'd give an 8.5 out of 10. Rec 2's more 6.5, that kind of thing. Where it's inferior because it doesn't have memorable characters in the same way the first one does. Some of its plot developments are stretching my believability and removing me from the realism that the first film created. In particular, things like the infrared door and the possessed angle that really, really pushed hard in this one. there where I'm like, doesn't feel quite as real anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of a problem in itself. I don't think it's a bad film.
No.
I think if you were to watch these two back to back and almost like imagine they were one film complete, I think it might be a better experience.
Which I think is what we did.
Kind of did. I think the problem is because I'd seen them before. Had I never seen them before and I was to watch them literally one after the other, I think that you might enjoy them more that way than perhaps a year between the two or 6 months and so on. But it's not bad. I mean, a bad wreck film, a bad wreck film is still a damn good film. That's the thing. That's
the strength of this series of films.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that.
Yeah, absolutely. Which brings us to the one we really want to talk about, the one we crow about the most. It is, of course, Rec 3, Genesis 2012 released movie. Spanish action horror film directed by Paco Plaza. This time, one of the two on his own, but it still has that clear Rec link, so it is great to see. It's a parallel sequel to the first two films, taking place before, during, and just after the morning. That's the morning segment, that's the after. Still takes place in that 24-hour period. So, let's say about the title. I don't like the title. I think it says something that's not true. Genesis. Genesis implies origin.
Yeah, but
this is not an origin.
No. It's just like a hint to that.
It's a continuation. It's a continuation of a story. There's no birth here. There's no this is how it started. We already know how it started, so to speak. This doesn't add anything to it.
Yeah, I would have had something related to a wedding, but not...
It's called Rec 3.
Yeah, there is.
It's called Rec 3.
Yeah.
Just
you didn't call Rec 2 anything but Rec 2.
Yeah, it's called Rec 3.
Yeah,
absolutely. Didn't need this subtitle. But that's such a small complaint for what is a film that is top quality. Yeah. And the film begins in the series' trademark found footage format, but obviously switches to the traditional cinematography that we've talked about a lot. And it's all taking place at the wedding of Coldo, Diego Martin, and Clara, Leticia Delaria. The first part of the movie is made up of footage taken throughout the wedding by many, but mainly Coldo's cousin. Yeah. Coldo's cousin is the main filmer here. He's doing a lot of the more amateur stuff, while we have a professional filmographer here as well to film the wedding.
In between,
The first 15 minutes of this film, the wedding portion found footage is so wonderful. Yeah.
It's so believable as a wedding.
So believable. Everything, it feels like a wedding. Generally, at any point did you think these two won't get married?
No, because they have the... even little tropes like the groom's mates come along being a bit leery. They bought drinks already. They're drinking before the ceremony. You know, like a lot of people would do. You know, kind of like it's a celebration day. Let's have a few drinks before we get going. And there's lots of stuff that's tropes for weddings as well. But working this, for example, during the vows part, they start singing and start playing a guitar, or the synchronized pre-planned groom and dance thing and stuff like that during the actual wedding. Shit like that. That's the family fussing over the cousin.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's really good.
And the location taking place at a huge country house is fantastic as well.
Because you've isolated it again.
Yes.
First two films, building block isolated. That's it. That's your location. This one, you've got a nice wedding venue. Yeah. Nice grounds. Yeah. It's big enough.
Bigger as well. Takes it larger.
Yeah, nice for all the action scenes that are going to happen. But it makes sense that they're all going to go there for the wedding after party.
But what really helps is that everybody comes across so lovable and so likeable. Because it's a wedding, everyone's really happy and stuff like that. You talked about the boys turning up, and I love that scene. Yeah. And you've seen it, you know it. Do you know what I mean? You've experienced it probably in your life, just that great moment. And just the love and care between each introduction. Uncle, and so on. And that's where we get hints to the original story. And what is a moment that is just so subtle. It's just like, good God, that's brilliant. As basically... the cousin has told the uncle, what happened to your hand? And he's like, he's got a little tissue, like a bandage on his hand. And basically he says, he was bitten by a dog that had recently come in to his vet. He's a vet. He's a veterinarian. And he'd been bitten by a dog that came in. And it's nothing to worry about. Yeah. And you're just like, it's the dog. Yeah. That's the same dog.
Yeah. And you're kind of like, oh no.
Yep. Of course, as the wedding goes on later that night, he will become a zombie and attack his wife. It's an incredibly done scene. The party's winding down at that point until everyone's well pissed and drunk.
There's a bit before that.
Go on, what have I missed?
When camera cuts to him vomiting outside.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, you do see a thing where it's like it looks like he's just drunk.
And it looks like he's vomiting up like at first you think, it's red wine. And I've not drunk much red wine and got drunk from it, but I think if you do,
it probably was blood, wasn't it?
Like, but at a quick glance from a camera, it probably just was like red wine. He'd had too much wine at the wedding.
Yeah, you're right, because the cousin turns around and says, "Oh, Uncle, too much to drink." And Uncle sort of turns around and he's like that. Like, he's not completely infected, but he's going that way and so on. And like later on, he'll be balancing on a balcony. And everyone's like, get down from there, get down from there. He will fall and obviously fall from height through the table. Yeah. His wife comes over to check on him and he's a zombie then completely and then bites her. And that just causes all chaos as obviously the uncle, when he was outside, had bitten and infected others as they then come rushing in through the windows. And it is chaotic. It's really chaotic.
It's horrible because it's like, there's just shift, literally, like it would be, 180. Just that sheer panic and that's it. That's everything's ruined. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Koldo and Clara are separated in this panic, and Koldo ends up in the kitchen with his cousin, Clara's sister Tia, a wedding photographer, a ton, and a copyright inspector, which is a really funny angle.
Sponge,
we'll get to John Sponge, in a bit, but the copyright inspector nicknamed royalties, and basically he's not even been invited to the wedding, but he's there to ensure they don't play any copyrighted music. This is where it becomes a proper film, as we mentioned at the very start of this talk through, where Koldo put the fucking camera down, smashes it, and it zooms out of that broken camera into cinematic stuff, and I love it, fucking love it. Can't talk about how much I love that change. A lot of
people didn't, did they?
No, that is one of the bone of contentions for this movie, which I find so strange.
It's weird.
Zombies are trying to burst through and stuff like that, so they escape through the air conditioning ducts, apart from a ton who can't fit because he's too fucking big, and he is a big lad, so it makes sense. Outside, the group finds a police vehicle, guessing the policeman, of course. After killing her, they try to contact the police, and this is where Royalty is then killed by other infected policemen. My understanding here is that they may not have gotten through, but they were heard, which is how the police were able to react to isolating the place shortly afterwards.
Yep.
That's what I would think happened there. The vehicle's sirens are triggered, which alert the infected, and the group escapes and joins other survivors inside a chapel, which, of course, the infected can't enter because of the possession religious angle. These are the touches where it works in this film. This saves a lot of people.
It all.
Through the PA system, Koldo hears Clara say that she's safe, and that she also announces here that she's pregnant, and he's like, I have to find her. We're glossing over it because it's an in-depth talk through of the series as a whole. But the feeling that you of Koldo and Clara, you buy into everything. Yeah. You buy into the fact that he had to go find her.
And you've not seen him, you've not seen lots of them. Like, you see them at a wedding, but they do such a good job in the wedding scene and the dancing scene, just to show how close they are. They're just really good actors.
Really good actors, really good actors, and it helps they're both quite good looking.
Yeah.
We then cut to Clara's side of the story, as Clara and the wedding priest have found refuge in the video surveillance room, and they're kind of watching the carnage unfold on that. They are then spotted by the infected and escape. They find Rafa, which is one of the guys from earlier on, a friend of the couple, a friend of Koldo, and one of Clara's friends, a French friend, who they'd left the party early, and he actually did point that out during it, and they'd partied for sex, basically. They then got so drunk, fell asleep somewhere, and didn't even know what the fuck was going on.
Again, believable.
Very, very believable. The priest, they're basically being chased by the infected, so the priest comes up with the idea, I can immobilise them, I can stop them with Lord's Prayer. And he basically recites prayers across the intercom, allowing Clara, Rafa, and Natalia to get away. Koldo then arrives at the surveillance room. So he's too late to catch up with them. There was a great sequence of events where he looks out a window as Clara's escaping into that window, and it had been like a second or two, and he'd have seen her, but they keep missing. It's one of those where they keep missing each other.
It's another little nod to the found footage, having the surveillance room as well.
It is. It is
another camera.
Yeah.
So
he sees the massacre. He then sees the massacre of all other members of his family, as well as that, and they get cornered and eaten by the infected. Can't do anything about it. Clara, Natalie, and Rafa meet another survivor, which is children's entertainer Sponge John. Sponge John. We actually meet him earlier on when he runs into their cousin with the camera. And basically, it's a joke on SpongeBob
SquarePants.
Yeah, SpongeBob SquarePants. Basically, so, well, no, because he says to him, you're SpongeBob. He's like, no, Sponge John.
John is Sponge.
Yes, it's so, obviously, it's to get around copyright issues. It is funny.
And he's the kind of bloke you could picture doing that as well. Yeah.
Natalie is bitten. Clara faces her infected mother. John shoots the mother before he himself is then bitten and killed too. Clara and Rafa flee through a tunnel, but Clara they get to what looks like a split. One is effectively exit, one is back towards the party. Rafa's like, look, let's go this way. Colo's dead, he's going to be dead and stuff like that. But she hears the distant sound of a song being played by Colo. He turns the song on in the ballroom to try and indicate to her that he's still alive.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because you can be like, well, that's a bit of a stretch. But no, why that song?
Yeah, and the song,
why that song specifically?
It's personal to them. But the actual... They're underneath, aren't they? So you would hear it.
Oh, yeah. It's not so much hearing it. It's more just a song playing, but it's because it's specific to them. Yeah. You know, think about if you were in a relationship. Think about if you and your partner have a particular song. You know, unless, you know, it's likely that would work. So I completely get it. So Clara insists that she's going to go off. Rafa is like, I'll come with you. She picks up a chainsaw here. This is what most people will probably notice from the famous cover, which is her in a wedding dress with blood and holding a chainsaw. And it's a lot of gore as she fights her way through the infected that have followed them into the hall, the tunnels. During this period, though, Rafa is bitten and infected, and Clara kills him before he turns. Colo makes his way back towards the kitchen. He finds a ton who'd killed himself, and he comes face to face with his uncle, the original one. And it's a bit of a gory, violent one. He puts a fucking mixer in his mouth and spins it around, uses the sword they used to cut the cake with. And before he leaves, though, Clara has climbed up an escape tunnel, basically, which leads to the kitchen, and they're finally reunited, but on the other side of a grate, so to speak. The infected are coming for her underneath, and the infected are coming from him through the doors as well. They're given a little bit of time, thanks to the priest, who manages to paralyze them, and he eventually gets her out with the knife. He uses a knife, and it falls for the grate. She has to go down and get it. It's a very long, tense scene as he's almost getting closer and closer, and you're thinking, is she going to get grabbed by a zombie? Is she going to get grabbed by a zombie? And thankfully, they're reunited properly. The priest's prayer is playing across the PA as they go into the garden. And it is an epic shot of this big area, and this dead, they're sort of standing there. Paralyzed, effectively. And it is pretty horrible. But you are kind of like, oh, God, they're going to get out of this. They're going to get out of this. They're walking towards the gate and so on.
They deserve it.
You do. You want to see them get out alive. But as they pass a zombie, one reaches up and grabs and bites Clara. It's her grandfather, who the film established very early on had hearing problems, including had a hearing aid, because when they're recording him in the early footage, he can't hear them. And they're like, oh, Granddad, turn your hearing aid on. Yeah. His hearing aid wasn't working. He couldn't hear the prayer. Yeah. And I fucking love that. Yeah. That is so clever.
Really clever little element, because it's a family wedding. There's going to be family members that, you know, this is just a natural thing. And you think, yeah, the PA system's great, but Granddad there didn't hear none of it, so he's still like...
I loved it. Yeah, it's just really awesome. And it's also just like, oh, fuck's sake. Because we know. They quickly come up with the idea of, well, if we cut her arm off just below the elbow, we can hopefully stop the infection, which they do in a pretty violent scene. Obviously, she's near falling unconscious, so Colo helps her towards the estate's exit. When they discover the authorities have quarantined the area. They put up the sheets, lock the gates and stuff like that. They then see that the attempt to stop Clara's infection has failed and it's spreading throughout her body. They do get outside where the police are waiting with guns, and what I liked as well is the police's quarantine isn't that you couldn't get out. It's that if you do get out,
we're going to kill you.
What's going to happen then? Yeah. Like, they weren't so like, oh, we don't care if you're alive or dead. They were willing to give a chance. They obviously see what's happened to Clara. They tell Colo to leave her alone. Colo leans in to give her a kiss. Clara then turns into a zombie right then and bites his tongue off in a pretty violent scene. Then she sort of turns to attack the men, and they both get shot in a hail of bullets. In their final moments, lying bleeding to death and obviously dying, they kind of reach out and hold each other's hands as they die of their wounds. And it's an incredibly sad ending, but one that had to be. Yeah. Had to be to a degree. I mean, well, no, tell a lie. They could have got out alive and been happy, and that was the end of it. But I do agree with the ending of having the emotional impact. Yeah. You know, it's very violent, very gory. Her biting his tongue off is pretty horrible looking, and then just getting gunned down in a hail of bullets, pretty horrible as well. But it fits with the sort of theme of the whole fucking movie. You know, and at that point, she'd had her arm cut off as well. You know, shit was not going well.
Yeah, she was still going to have some sort of serious memories from her wedding day.
Yeah, it isn't going to be that photo album.
Yeah. Cut to, our wedding day.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
It's a fantastic movie. It is as good as, if at times, better than the first film. On a personal level, I like it more because of the story. But for the overarching narrative and the fact that you could watch this easily without ever having seen Wreck.
Yeah, because
it helps to have seen it.
Yeah.
But I don't think you need to.
No.
You could still thoroughly enjoy this as a zombie horror.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. There are a couple of things. Obviously, the dog bite wouldn't make any point of reference to you. There's a point later on where the priest, when he realises it's something demonic, it's because he sees in the mirror Tristiana, in a mirror in one of the normal infected, and that's where he kind of deduces that it's something demonic. He doesn't like demonic possession and stuff like that, which is why he starts to recite the prayers and stuff like that. Where I think Rec 3 excels is by dropping a lot of the stuff that had made the series popular in regards to the found footage aspect, because obviously, as Woody said, it wouldn't have made much sense to do that in the way the film wanted to be told. But as well, it's given us characters, more than any of them so far, that you've really felt a lot of love and affection for. We're not just talking about the main two. I don't think there's a character in it where I was like, nah, you suck.
Yeah. Yeah. And
even things like Sponge John.
Oh, yeah, he was funny, because it would be, because we've been to like a family party where there's like really shit versions of Disney ones.
Yes.
Like when they're so careful, but they just look really shit. Like the eyes are a bit wonky.
Yeah, because obviously
because they can't do it properly.
Yep.
I think with the found footage thing is, do you make people invest in these characters? It just becomes one less distraction to worry about why they're still filming. Because it's still so tense, and the reason they stopped filming is because it's all gone to shit outside. Just means I want to carry on watching the story. I'm not worried about it's gone from found footage to normal, which I don't get. People don't like it, but I know it's a personal thing. But
for me, it seems most people are like, oh, it lacks the realism then. And for that, I'd say, did you see Rec 2? Like the possession angle and stuff like that. But where I think it really excels as well, it obviously relates to characters, but the acting. Everyone is brilliant in this. From the very start, when they've got to act like, think about that. We're like this. It felt like a real wedding to us, but it wasn't. No. That was acting. Yeah. All of them. A lot of actors.
Yeah, you have to take a lot of, and it feels like they probably filmed quite a lot of footage.
Probably, I suspected they probably went down the route of, well, let's do it like it's a real wedding, and everybody have drinks, and it'll be a party, and it'll be a good time, and we'll get all the footage, and we can then cut and use it and stuff like that. There would have been certain things they had to plan, like the dancing and stuff like that. Yeah. But for the most part, I can't picture a whole, all right, guys, that scene's done, everybody wait.
Yeah.
No, it didn't seem like it worked that way. Like you let it flow.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And that really comes across really, really well. It's gory. This is actually probably the goriest of the bunch of all four films, I think. Because obviously the filming style changed, it allowed us to see a lot better lighting, colours, and there's a lot of violence, a lot of gore. You already touched upon it. It has moments of humour. Humour, moments where it's a little bit silly. Not silly in the sense like that's stupid, but more just like I said, the Sponge Johnson, the jokes and references with Rafa and stuff like that. That works in the context of things as well. And there's one of them's bitten by one of the elderly, but it's false teeth. Remember, the false teeth come out and it's just there. So it's got those elements too, but it also has a lot of sadness. We're not just talking about the ending. One of my favourite scenes is near the end, as sun is coming up and Coldo is back in the original ballroom where it kicked off, and the devastation is just left lying. There's no more zombies there. They've all gone and spread around, but just the devastation of what it was with the last time he was there to what it is now. And that's like, and it's a wide shot, and it's like, oh, that's pretty fucking horrible. Atun, the video photographer, coming back and finding that he'd cut his wrists. The sympathy you feel for the uncle, this isn't his fault. No. It was never his fault either. No. You know, patient zero for this event, but not his fault.
Definitely not.
You know, these are sad moments, and of course, obviously, the ending. Obviously, it's incredibly told story. Great entry in the series. Yeah, my favourite Rec movie.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Same here.
Which brings us to the last one, Rec 4 Apocalypse 2014. Another stupidly titled name. It is not an apocalypse. It all takes place on one very small place, and in my opinion, ends the franchise completely. Apocalypse suggests something grander.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't. This is actually scaled back. It's got the least amount of characters.
Yeah.
Characters. While it has a lot of people that become zombies, they're not characters.
No.
This is, here's 3 or 4 characters, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And its location is very bland. It's a boat. There's not much you can do about it. It does bring back that feeling of, what do they call it? It's claustrophobia. A boat does work very, very well in that regards. And I do think it results in a very cool ending, like a very action-orientated ending. But we'll get to that. The final installment of the franchise. Direct sequel to Wreck 2, taking place immediately after the events of the second film. Jami Balgarar, the director of the first two installments, returns here to direct this film. So, two directors teamed up for first and second one. One of them did the third film. This guy did the fourth film. Can't say it's not completely and utterly in their hands. You can't.
Yeah, no one else kind of jumped in. Or nope. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But you could argue, one of them was maybe the better than the other based off what films they did.
Because we've identified the ones we like the most.
Yeah.
It lines up quite nicely.
It does, yeah. But of course, this also sees actress Manuela Velasquez returning to reprise her role as the reporter Angela Vidal. And we kick in with a special forces team going into the apartment complex to rescue Angela and destroy the building. That's the part that starts directly after Wreck 2. So again, we're keeping very tight inside that period. They are attacked by the infected firefighters and their residents. Credit, a lot of people reprised their roles for these scenes.
Yeah,
Credit to those people that came back years later just to have a very brief scene in this. Love that. The team survivors are Lucas and Guzman. They complete their assignment and destroy it. And we then jump to Angela awakening on a ship, chained to a bed and remembering nothing of the events that occurred afterwards. We see a doctor take a sample of Angela's blood for testing. Lucas and Guzman are also on board the vessel and they're being quarantined. Now, you said earlier on at the point of this video you didn't like this. However, I actually really like it. Safety. Quarantine in this boat is incredibly smart. It's not moored. It's at sea.
I think I'd be safer if it moored, like an oil rig.
An oil rig is different. An oil rig would be useful, but you're not going to get many unused oil rigs.
So if you've done all this data, all this work, and then the boat sinks...
And destroyed.
And release all this
a boat sinking
stuff.
Yeah, but it's not, you're saying releasing the infected stuff into the sea.
Yeah.
You're acting like we're going to have fucking infected octopuses swimming about and stuff like that.
There's mammals that live in the sea. Things can transfer between mammals.
Oh, I think
zoonotic diseases.
I think if the ship was sinking, that is the end of it.
Okay.
Absolutely. So Angela tries to escape and fails, but she's informed by another doctor that she's actually not infected. She's not infected. They know that. And they just don't understand why.
Yeah.
Guzman makes acquaintance with the ship's captain Ortega and the technician Nick, and they reconstruct the events with the apartment complex with the aid of Angela's camera. Now, a lot of build-up in this film is reconstructing these events in the camera. As we all know, that if that gets revealed, it will reveal what actually happened to Angela. Because the film basically spends a lot of time trying to make you believe Angela is now a villain.
Yeah.
And she's hiding what she's infected with all along, which doesn't match up to the fact that the doctors tested her and found her not infected. That really confuses the matter, don't you think?
Definitely, because you think, oh, it'd be quite clearly, literally, that's the first thing you do. You take samples and go, she's clearly infected.
Yeah.
So yes, it kind of tries to lead you off a little bit, doesn't it?
Indeed. Nick sends the film to the doctor in the laboratory where they begin their experimentations and so on. And then during a power outage occurs, Angela runs into Guzman and they kind of talk a bit. There's kind of suggestion that there might be a little bit of attraction between the two, but it's certainly not built on. I'm going to be honest here. This isn't Angela's best film. No. This isn't Manuela Velasquez's best performance. She has to play a bit more of bland and static character here, and it doesn't really work. And the characters of Guzman doesn't really light up the screen either. It's here as well, though, the doctors discover that their test subject, an infected monkey, has apparently escaped or been let free during this blackout. So who did it?
Da, da, da.
This monkey ends up infecting the ship's cook, who in turn contaminates the food. Ingestion infects the majority of the crew and the guards. Did like this part of the film. The build-up, the cook getting sicker, and then you see him shit going in the food and all that. I like that angle. I think it was a clever way to do it.
Quite quick as well, isn't it?
It is quite quick, yeah.
In your food, there you go.
Yeah. After an unsuccessful attempt by the doctors to cure the cook with an antidote as well, that fails. It just seems to make him even more aggressive. Angela, Guzman, Lucas, and, we haven't mentioned her yet, an elderly woman is on the boat, all work together. They make for the bridge. This elderly woman is confused about where she is because the last thing she remembers was being at her grandson.
I think it's her grandson.
Granddaughter. What? She's the grandmother of one of
Calder
or Clara from the third film. It's a nice touch. Probably wasn't needed.
No.
But it's a nice little link, as if these are the last. If you think about it, the last of the wreck issues, the problems. This film implies and suggests that they have quarantined and dealt with every issue, and all the relating to it is here on the boat.
Yeah.
That so like the building was destroyed, the wedding was destroyed, everything was killed and destroyed. Yeah. And what we have here is Angela from the first and second film, the elderly woman from the wedding, Guzman from this film. These are the last.
Yeah, it feels like, I don't know if the old woman lady mentions where she was for the wedding. No, but it must be that she went to a side room or something.
She's elderly. She could have fallen asleep.
Yeah.
She says, doesn't she? She says she had an early night. She says she had an early night.
Oh, okay.
She was tired and had an early night.
Which makes sense.
Absolutely, and it works as well because she seems to be. She almost seems to have slight dementia. Slight dementia about food. She doesn't understand why she's there. She doesn't even seem to really that big bothered about it. Yeah. She's just like, oh, can you get my... Yeah, absolutely. But on the way there, they're separated, but she's separated from the group. Lucas, who's kind of bonded with her and cared for her, he's tried to get her food and stuff like that. He stays to rescue her, but he finds her infected and is forced to shoot her. One of the doctors recognises that the attempt to find an antidote was failed because it requires an unmutated strain of the original pathogen, which is why, number 2, they wanted the blood.
Yeah.
There we go. Shortly before we can initiate a self-destruct sequence, because it's basically falling apart, they've seen the affected Roman in the boat. His assistant informs him and they see the reconstructed film, realising that Angela was infected with the well-known parasite, and that effectively makes her its carrier. They still can't understand how they, when they tested her, but they don't know enough to worry too much about it. He then attempts to extract the parasite by forcing surgery on Angela, who is saved when an attack by a now infected doctor allows her to escape. He searches for Angela and she ambushes him and then bites him on the arm. She does it to prove a point.
Yeah.
Saying, well, go test yourself now.
Yeah.
And he does. He scans his own blood, it reads negative, but he can't quite believe it to be true. He's like, this has to be a trick somehow and so on. But of course, I think most people will have worked out what it was at this point, right? You might not know who, but you're like, it's because it's not in here anymore.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah. It's not in there anymore. And then you start going, well, who's left?
Yeah, kind of counting down.
And don't get me wrong, when you do realise it, it is nice. You're like, of course. The parasite transferred to Guzman. And when did that happen? The blackout. And I was like, you know what?
Makes sense.
You know what?
Yeah.
And it makes sense as well. If your parasite wants to live, Angela is a problem now. She's being tested on. You'd probably be inside thinking, they're going to find me. Yeah. That kind of thing. Oh, this guy, he's big and strong.
Yeah, let's find a new one.
Let's get this host. Guzman is aware of this once it's revealed as well. And he traps Angela within the ship's bowels as Nick launches the ship's self-destruct sequence. Lucas and Nick try and fail to start the ship's auxiliary engine. Lucas is killed by the infected. I like this sequence here as well because this involves some intriguing weapons, like a motor, a speedboat motor. The leg part with the blade.
Yeah, with the rudder.
So you do get some nice gory splattering and gore. You do get some CGI infected monkeys though, which look horrendous. Really, really didn't like them. Nick finds Angela to run from said infected monkeys. They manage to kill with the outboard motor. They're then attacked by Guzman, who would then attempts to transfer the parasite back into Angela. Because, you're all right, you're my host, let's go. We're leaving, let's go. Shortly before he succeeds, Nick and Angela manage to kill him with a harpoon gun, and they leave the boat as the infected chase after them, jumping into the ocean and escape using a life raft, and the ship explodes. This last sequence, the action portion of this, is really, really good. It's pissing with rain outside on the boat. The infected are chasing them, have to climb up this net. They're following them.
It is really good.
It's really, really well done stuff. And it's nice to see a rare event here. People survive.
Yeah.
Properly. Angela's not infected. No. The parasite was inside Guzman. That is that.
Yeah.
Nick, who is a likeable character in it, a likeable character, survives.
Yeah.
And you're like, where's the twist? Where's the thing? Where's what's going on? There's an argument to be said that when if they get back to land, because
they're going to ask questions.
They're probably just going to be immediately grabbed by the government again and tested and so on. But hopefully once it's kind of clear and they tell the story and stuff like that, will be the end of it.
Yeah.
And we actually, at the end of the movie, they're shown in a cab having arrived home as well.
Yeah.
But in between that, we do get one last sequence, which is the parasite. Now loose, underwater, and we see it being devoured by a fish. You and I have taken this in two different ways, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to carry on. I reckon it'll go up the food chain and then back into the humans again.
I disagree. I think that was it being eaten by a predatory fish. Eaten and killed.
No, I think it's
Here's why.
Predatory fish, they're always going to eat more and more and more. I think it was just like a little teaser for it's going to carry on going.
Right. Here's where I think you're getting it wrong. So, if I ate the parasite, the parasite is dead. I've eaten it. I've bitten into it. I've eaten it. It's gone into my stomach acids. It's done all of that. When the parasite's infecting, it's not going to be going into. It's going to be going into a different part of my body. It's going to be forcing my teeth. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm not eating it. The fish ate it. The parasite didn't go in it. It didn't infect it. The fish ate it.
I still.
Oh, I really think you got this wrong. And I'm proved right. Do you know why?
Why?
There hasn't been a Wreck sequel since.
Because everyone's dead. They can't make the film again.
This is an okay movie. It's a good movie at times. At other times, I think it's just okay. I think it falls middle of the road. Where, if I was to say, if you'd asked me to rank all 4 films, I might put this one at the lowest.
Yeah.
Just because, let's be honest, the formula was tired here. It doesn't do anything new. Its location is interesting, and its finishing of the story is fine.
I feel like they've gone through a list of places where an outbreak of something's going to be pretty shit. So, like, when you see like on these cruise ships where food poisoning sweeps through it, and everyone's like firing out of both ends. You're on a ship. Where are you going to go? No one wants you on land because you're going to go spread it on land, which is why the boat came up. So a block of flats, shut that down, isolated. A wedding in the middle of nowhere, shut that down. A boat, if you're infected, stay on your boat. So, yeah, I think by that point they were just going through a list of places where an infection would be pretty, like, epic but isolated. Yeah,
the isolation does add a nice touch to it. As I said at the start, I do like the claustrophobic feel. The problem is the infected side of things just isn't that interesting here. And I never really felt scared, particularly for our main cast, because it quickly establishes that it's pretty easy immediately to see who's going to live or die.
Yeah.
It really, really is. The parts where they're kind of running through corridors and stuff like that, being chased by infected, are cool. But the problem with that is who is infected. These are all faceless nobodies that were soldiers on there. Whereas before you were seeing like a fireman that you just spent the last 15 minutes with, now is an infected. Here it's like, they're all wearing the same outfits, camo. There's nothing that really stands out about any of them. There were angles that could have been better. There's a great one involving a ship engineer. And again, that never really goes to fruition. It was like, is he going to be a bit more heroic? No, he just ends up dead as well. The ship's cook, he's probably the most iconic looking one of the lot of them because we get a little bit more focus on him as he slowly turns rather than immediately turning. Yeah. But when I think of this movie, I think of a lot of the character stuff and not the zombie stuff, which is strange. I also think they really stepped back on the possession thing and were like, you know what, let's just focus on the parasite aspect of it rather than anything possession wise at all. It becomes scientific again, almost non-religious based.
Because then how do you fit that into the location?
What they wanted, what they wanted to do. I'm not complaining. No. I'm not complaining. To me, it's more sensible, realistic outlook on it. But then there's another part. It's like, what, like 3 doctors though? Like, this is quite a big deal, and only 3 doctors are here, and you kind of can't but feel like security would be beefier. There'd be a lot more people here, a lot more stuff. It's a little bit too easy for Angela to get out. The infected monkey thing, we don't even see these infected monkeys. We're just told about, one of the patients. It's like, the patient escaped, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
What? And then later on, you get the CGI monkey, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
right, that was a thing. It's not violently gory in the sense that where you're really going to remember a lot of those events. It's actually a struggle to put a lot of the middle portions of these movies together.
Yeah.
This movie's together. Where it's like, well, how did they get here and how did they get here? We spend a lot of time on the bridge where they're deconstructing this video. That isn't always the most interesting thing. There's a little bit of tension to it because we know what it would mean when that's revealed. Yeah. But it takes too long to get to that point.
For it to be worth it.
And the payoff isn't worth it because Angela isn't infected anyway, in that sense. But I think this is just the one where you kind of like, oh, it's probably a good thing maybe it was over here and you didn't continue, because see it from someone else's perspective. They love Rec 1, Rec 2 they might really like, Rec 3 what they don't like, Rec 4 they don't like. It would seem like diminishing results, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I completely understand that. And that, like we said at the start, for us it's peaks and valleys, and this is one of the valleys. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's the in-depth of the Rec series to date. Let us know what you think of them in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com, as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Tumblr. Go to Patreon to help us out over there. That's patreon.com/gbhbl, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?